that is gender responsive budgets. So all of you know what is budget. Ayavyaya. I mean, of course, there are others from non-Karnatakas also. So I won't switch over to Kannada. So basically, budget talks about revenue, expenditure. So in common sense. So what is gender responsive budgets? See, I introduced you some of the concepts. So in which gender sensitivity, gender responsiveness also I did introduce you. So here in the gender responsive budgets, budgets are made to be gender responsive. So that is the crux of gender responsive budgets. It is also called gender budgets. JRB or GB both are one and the same. And in Karnataka Fiscal Policy Institute, FPA, which is located in Gangeri area. So they are responsible for preparing the gender budget, and anybody is interested, you can also see their reports on their website. FPA website is there. I also gave reference in this in the presentation, and if you want, you can also see that. So what is gender responsive budgets and what is gender budget? See, recent development, what is the most important development in the 20th century was entry of women into economic and political activities previously undertaken almost entirely by men. So this is the situation that we observe, as I was talking about. My earlier generation of mine, very few women are working. So, now my generation, there are some, and your generation, much more women are coming out and they are actively participating in economic and political activities. Economic activity need not necessarily working in a corporate sector. More women are engaged in unorganized sector, as I told you. There are many women engaged in unorganized sector and doing small jobs and companies. So basically, we put it all together that there are more women into the economic and political activities which were earlier undertaken only by men. There are also some jobs which were very much done by only by men, and more women are seen. For example, police and this one army. You also find more women and IAS officers, and there are many fields where which was mainly dominated by men. More women are taking place. So this is one of the reasons why there is a need for gender budgeting. So more and more activities women are taking up. So gender budgeting is a tool for the government to make sure that the budgets favor both men and women by allocating resources that benefit both men and women. So when it comes to the question of policy and implementation of policy, as I told you, there are policies are very important. So just simple policy doesn't mean anything. So policies are to be operationalized. Policies are to be operationalized in the form of programs, and the programs need money. Otherwise how will they get implemented? So in all these things, money is very important. So if the government objective is to attain gender equality, then government should come out with a policy, and government should come up with a programs. And just simply writing the programs doesn't help. They have to be backed by money. They have to be backed by the resources. So gender budgeting makes sure that the policies and programs are properly backed, whether they are reaching they are getting sufficient funds or not. So gender budgeting, it is a tool for the governments to make sure that the budgets are favorable both men and women, whether allocations are properly made or not. So I was telling budgets operationalize public policy. And as I told you, public policy itself is not anything, but it has to be operationalized, and budgets are operationalized. For example, if the policy is attaining 100% literacy for girls, it gets operationalized, more funds will be allocated for promoting girl child education. So that is the link between the public policy and the budgets. And second thing, these are propositions that I am making. Second one is budgets impact men and women differently. So we may be assuming that budgets are gender neutral, but they are not. They impact men and women differently because men and women are differently located in both economic, political, and social spheres. So first itself, I made a statement that there is a increasing entry of women in political and economic spheres, but they are located differently. As I told you, there are more women in unorganized sector and low-paid jobs, and also in politically also you see we have reservation, panchayat raj, and all this. With all that, how many women are there in decision-making positions? So, budgets impact men. The proposition is that budgets impact men and women differently. So, because of that, we need gender budgeting. And budgets include revenue and expenditure. So when we are talking about budgeting, gender budgeting, we should talk about both revenue and expenditure. But till today, we are talking only about the expenditure, but not about the revenue. See, why we have to look at revenue is imposition of any particular tax will affect men and women differently. If you take about income tax itself, so if you take income tax to make it gender sensitive, the what is called standard deduction used to have. So 50,000 or 1 lakh, if it is given, it is okay. It looks like it is given more preference, more concession is given for women, more opportunities given for women. But how many women are there who are in the income bracket in which they have to pay the income tax? There are very few women in the income tax bracket because majority of the women who are employed in the unorganized sector, they get very, so these concessions don't mean anything. So like apparently they look like they are gender sensitive, but the ground reality is very few women are within that income bracket. So we need to evolve policy. Similarly, GST. GST, of course, now there is some rationalization taking place, but initially, very first time when GST was introduced, there was so much of tax on the products which women use, and especially the sanitary pads and sanitary napkins, they were also taxed at a higher rate. So then feminists have they all made noise and they all appealed that this is the practical need of women and it should not be taxed so much. Then later it was. So this is what is called a gender sensitivity. If the policymakers are gender insensitive, they make blanket allocations and blanket taxes. See here, why I am talking about taxes is when we are talking about the gender budgets, we only mainly lot of work is going on only with about the expenditure, but very less work is available on revenue and how raising revenue through taxes or any other means affect men and women differently. It is still a virgin area, and anybody is interested, you can take up this research. So how gender responsive budgets came into existence in India is mainly 2004-5. Our the then finance minister, he initiated this, and these are some of the statements of finance minister. You can read them. As I told you, I am sharing them, so I don't spend time on reading these things. So basically, feminist economists, they argued that there should be gender budgeting, it has to be improved. So Chidambaram, our Honorable Minister of Finance, he included. So while introducing, and these are the statements of him. So this is how the evaluation of gender budgeting in India has taken place. So this was gender budgeting officially 5-6. It was adopted and institutionalized with the introduction of gender budget statement to report allocations of women. So 2005-6, it was officially accepted. Gender budgeting is officially introduced, and the gender budget statement is given in the 2005 and 6 budget. So then 2007, what happened is gender budget cells and cells were introduced. Ministry of Finance issued a charter of gender budget cells in all ministries. Minister of Women and Child Development launched gender budgeting scheme for capacity building. See, several programs were introduced, gender budgeting. We were also part of that training programs. Fiscal Policy Institute, as I told you, in Karnataka, they had organized several programs for gender budgeting training and all. So then 2008-9, child budgeting was also done. Child budgeting was institutionalized through the Statement of Allocation for the Welfare of Children. That was Statement 12, 2008-9. And 2022 advocated optimum budgetary resources for women and child welfare, effective gender budgeting and child budgeting across ministries. There was more stress on, because not all ministries are doing the gender budgeting. So from 2022, there was more stress on all the ministries to be having the gender budgeting. And 24-25 gender budgeting format was revised. See, the Ministry of Finance introduced Part C in the gender budget statement towards schemes which where the allocation of women is less than 30%. See, in gender budgeting, I don't know if I have a slide. It is there. It is. I will tell you. In gender budgeting, the schemes are classified into A, B, C. Scheme A is the 100% women-oriented scheme, women-oriented allocation. Under the Part A, all these schemes where 100% of allocation is to be spent on women-oriented programs, only women. So whereas in the Part C, the schemes are where 30% of the money is allocated for women. This is Part B. But at 24-25, they introduced C also. So in the C, where the allocation is less than 30%, they are classified as women. Actually, it is not, but what is remained? 100% are women-oriented schemes, that is Part A. And Part B is a 30% women-specific schemes, whereas Part C, less than 30%. So that is made in 24-25, exclusively they made Part C also in the 24-25 budget. See, what is gender budgeting is? It is a strategy for ensuring gender-sensitive resource allocation, a tool for engendering macroeconomic policy. So you have seen the concepts. Gender sensitive. What is meant by gender sensitive? I just explained to you. So gender budgeting is gender sensitive resource allocation. So gender sensitive resource allocation for engendering the macroeconomic policy. So macroeconomic policy is simple allocation of resources. It may not be able to reach everybody. So especially gender sensitive resource allocation is done through what is called the gender budgeting. So it's not a separate budget for women. It is a general budget analyzed for constructed from a gender perspective. It enables tracking and allocating resources for women's empowerment. It dissects the government budget to establish gender differential impact, and it involves analyzing actual government expenditures and revenues for women and girls compared to men and boys, as well as in relation to their needs. It's not just how much money is spent on boys, how much money is spent on girls. In relation to their needs, what are the needs? So this is actually ideally gender budgeting should be doing all this. Ideally, gender budgeting should enable us to track the allocation of resources. Like this year budget, how much has been allocated for 100% women-oriented programs, how much is spent, how much is not spent. If it is not spent, why it is not spent. And so that, that will give us to understand why it is not spent. So it gives an opportunity to decide next allocation, whether we should give so much money or taking into consideration the inflation, we should allocate more. If it is to be allocated, how much more? What should be the targets? All that should depend on understanding this year's allocation. So budget gives us such kind of opportunity to analyze and also dissect government budget to establish gender differential impact. See, allocation of money, how much it has, what impact it had on men and women. So gender budget gives such opportunities. That is why we need gender budgeting. But what is happening in reality is different. But theoretically, gender budgeting should give us such opportunity. So it is a process of using gender perspective at all stages of policy making. As I told you, gender mainstreaming and gender perspective, They are included at every stage of policy making. See, for example, the gender lens. Looking with gender lens. Looking at gender lens means looking at the differences between the economic participation in various variables of men and women. So it includes the usage of gender lens in formulation of legislation, policies and plans, allocation and collection of resources, implementation, execution, monitoring, corrective action. All that will be included in the gender budget process. In the sense, a gender perspective is included at every stage of the policy making and execution and monitoring. So this is what a gender budget is expected to that. It is far from just reporting information in the format provided by GBS. It uses the budget as one of the main entry points to correct gender gaps, but is not limited to the budget statement. Rather, it is a continuum of an ongoing process. So this is what actually gender budgeting is. Theoretically, it should be doing all this. So it involves 4 components. So budgetary allocation of resources to various heads and actual government outlays. Then accounting how these resources are utilized for a particular purpose. How much is spent on what, and evaluation of the effectiveness of these resources. Actually, ideally, it should be doing it. So allocation of resources and how they are spent. Allocation, is it in accordance with the requirement? So all that should happen. So it involves looking at all 4 components from the point of women as beneficiaries, whether budget allocations are helping women or not. So actual government outlays, where they are, how much is actually allocated. And it also looks at the evaluating the effectiveness. When this 100 crores is allocated for this particular program or project, how effective is, how many got benefited. So these are the 4 components of gender budgeting. So gender budgeting will be linked to the policies. How it will be linked to the policies is, there are 3 steps. Examine the position of women. We examine the position of women, men, boys and girls in each area of economic and social life, addressed by budget taking into account. So, and then gender budgeting will help us. This year allocations are like this, but or maybe look at for 4 years, we have allocations like this, but this has resulted into this. It is possible to change. The policy change should come from the understanding of what has happened to the allocations. And examine whether the government policy adequately addresses the inequalities which have been identified, and examine whether resources are being allocated in ways that are likely to reduce inequalities. So all these things will come from the budget, gender budget. So that will lead to what is called the appropriate policies. Ideally, this should be the process. Why we need gender responsive budgets is, gender budgets are important because budgets are not, as I told you, budgets are not gender neutral. There are differences between men and women. Differences in what? Differences in employment and earning, differences in the receipts of welfare benefits, differences in incomes, differences in use of public services, and obligation for paid and care work. By now you know about all these things. See, use of public services. More women use government, more women use public services than men. See, even the poor families also, boys buy a bike, girl may not buy. So most, even low income groups, mostly women use public services than men. Similarly, there are income differences, men and women. And for various reasons, that itself would be a lecture for 2-3 hours if we look at why there are differences. And employment also, there are differences between men and women. Because of all these things, the gender responsive budgets are important. So it is important to identify the gendered needs of men and women and accordingly allocate the resources. So gender characteristics of household determine above differences. See, all these differences are enhanced by what is called the gender characteristics of households. So gender characteristics of households determine all these things, whether the household is headed by a single male or female, whether both male and female earn, So gender relations within the household and a distribution of paid and unpaid work. How much work is done by paid, how much paid work is done by men and how much unpaid work. And extent of women's financial autonomy and male breadwinner or female carer. So all these household characteristics, they will determine all these things, the differences in employment, difference in incomes, all these things are determined by the characteristics of these. So the goal of gender budgeting in its broadest conception is to integrate gender-oriented concerns into fiscal policies and administration. So because of these differences, we really need gender budgeting so that it will take care of it will integrate the gender-oriented concerns into fiscal policies and administration. See, all these are gendered policies. So interrelated goals of gender budget is, there are three goals. One is raise awareness and understanding of gender issues and impacts of budget and policies. Sharp as in the research paper, it is mentioned here. I have given the reference here. So the interrelated goals of gender budgets are, first is raising awareness and understanding of gender issues and impacts of budget and policies. It's not just thinking that you throw some money, it will help both men and women. It's not like that. So gender budget, it creates awareness that gender issues and make governments accountable for their gender budgetary and policy commitments. See, next, what the gender budgeting does is it makes the government accountable. So government is accountable, but government makes an announcement that we are going to reduce gender gap in education. So then government should be accountable for that. So more money is to be allocated, appropriate money is to be allocated, appropriate changes are to be made. So that comes from the gender budgeting. And third one is change and refine government budgets and policies to promote equality. By looking at the gender budgets, it is possible for the government to change or refine based on the gender needs. So if the budgets are gender sensitive, when you observe over a period of time, it is possible to refine, and they help in promoting gender equality by refining the government policies. So these are the three interrelated. All three are interrelated. First, creating awareness is very important. So when the awareness is created, and the government will be accountable for the gender budgetary. So not just simple accountability is not sufficient. So this awareness and accountability should lead to what is called the appropriate changes in the existing policies. So that comes from the gender budget. When all these things are taken care, this is the area where all these things converge and the outcome will be better. So that is these are the interrelated goals of gender budgets. So of course, gender budgeting, it started in Australia. Earliest was in Australia in 1980. And Australia's landmark gender budgeting initiative 1984 required government ministries and departments to analyze the impacts of annual budget on women and girls with a focus on public expenditure. So now more than 100 countries, several countries have adopted what is called the gender budgeting. Whereas in India, government of India initiated formally institutionalized gender budgeting by mandating all ministries to allocate specific portion. So government mandated the departments to start to make the gender budgeting, and union initiative was institutionalized through the development of a system of, institutions were put up, and then in Karnataka, gender budgeting was present in 2027, and 26 Indian states and union territories up to 2022 have adopted the gender budgeting. So gender budget statement was 27, 25, 26. 2005-6 first introduced the union budget. 2005-6 it was introduced. So it captures the quantum of budget resources earmarked for women and women. So gender budget statement gives us about this. So gender budget statement is significant as it is the only source of verifiable and quantify quantitative information. So by looking at a gender budget statement, so how funds are allocated, it will be known. So it reflects both schemes meant exclusively for women. As I told you, part A is 100% women oriented schemes, and scheme B is at least 30% of the benefits are earmarked for women. And now they have introduced part C also, where less than 30% of the allocations are for women. So when GBS gender budget statement was first time introduced in 2005-6, it was called statement 7, and later it became statement 20. So, and budget circular 21-22 also mentions about the process, and it is okay. I'm not reading this. So how the process is, every year ministry departments are requested through the annual budget circular. So they will be sent budget circular. There will be a format. In this format, all the ministries and departments have to submit the data. On the basis of the information thus furnished, the gender budget statement will be prepared. So what this statement indicates is budget provisions for schemes that are substantially part A, as I told you. Part B, you can also go through the gender budgets, they are there. Latest gender budget is also there. For Karnataka also it is there. I think central government also state-wise they have given. It is gender budget hub or something like that. I think I must have given in the end. Otherwise, Karnataka, you can go to Fiscal Policy Institute, and there you will find it. Other states is there in the central this one. So who are the stakeholders in gender budgeting is, of course, ministries and sectoral ministries and development partners and donors. So there are different stages of gender budgeting, taking into various stages, and at the budget preparation stage, ensure financial appropriation made in budgets match the needs. So analysis budget estimates for the current year vis-a-vis revised. See, this year estimates will be based on the revised estimates of last year or the actual expenditure of the previous years. So they are to be looked at for allocating the resources for the current year. It starts with that, and the post-budget stage, analyze sector-wise and ministry-wise shares of allocations. So at the budget implementation stage, whether it is spent what it was meant for, intended, and to the full extent, what are the delivery costs, what are the subsidies. See, implementation stage, this is needed. It is not happening, but ideally it should happen. So at the post-implementation stage, it is important to look at what has been the outcomes, what is the impact of the budget, and analyze the post implementation stage, and analyzes expected outcomes from the appropriation versus actual outcomes, including unintended ones. So impact assessment of the programs, projects and schemes. Have they met their objectives and purpose? This is also done at the post gender budget stage. So, but this is the weakest link in our present system. Most of the time it is happening 10% increase from last year to this year without much of economic rationale. So this is the 2021. Just to give you a feel of what is gender budget statement, I had a 2021. So this is the gender budget statement, Minister of Finance. So this is allocations reported in the gender budget in rupees crores and as a percentage to total expenditure. So total budgetary allocation, these are the amounts, and specific schemes are part A, and all these are total expenditure, gender budget as a percentage of total budgetary expenditure. I still have got other things also I will show you. So these are ministries reporting, and ministries reporting only part A, and ministries reporting part B. And these are the ministries, and these are the ministries did not report allocations in the gender budget statement. So many, still long way to go. Gendered impact of taxation, as I told you, we are only talking about expenditure, how public expenditure affects men and women differently, and similarly taxation also affects men and women differently. There was in 2004 paper I read 4 stylized facts about gender differences. See, one is gender differences in paid employment, including formal and informal wages and occupational segregation. So they should be taken into consideration. Women's work in the unpaid care economy, and gender differences in consumption expenditure, gender differences in property rights and asset ownership. So she spoke about the stylish fact about the gender differences in economic activity that should be used to understand the impact of taxation. See, till now we are only looking at the impact of expenditure, but if we want to look at the impact of taxation, we need to look at the gender differences in paid employment, whether they are formal or informal, where men are located, where women are located. And we should also look at women's work in the unpaid care economy. See, unpaid care economy is now, it won't enter into national income statistics. So even if government imposes taxes, even if government reduces taxes also, it won't affect the status of women in the unpaid care economy. So it is important to look at the how many are employed in the unpaid care economy, and gender differences in consumption expenditure. See, what we observe is there are differences in what men and women consume. Say there are more pan chewers among men. That this is one that comes to my mind, and more smokers among men than women. Even though some places women also smoke, and like that, even in consumption also there are differences. So where from the taxes are raised? If more taxes are raised from income, that is direct taxes, and more taxes are raised from the goods and services. For example, in very poor families, when taxes are imposed on goods and services, prices of the goods and services increase. With limited income, women will allocate more resources for men and children, and they eat less. So that way, it will have impact if the taxes are imposed heavily on subsistence goods. So, and similarly, services. If service taxes are high, women may not be able to use the services because their incomes are low. So all these things are to be taken into consideration when we are looking at the gendered impact of taxation. Still, there is so much scope is there for the youngsters from economics and commerce to work in this particular area of the impact of taxation. Some work is going on. So what is the performance of gender budgets? What is happening? So this is adoption of gender budgeting in Indian states. Here I have given the references also. This is Fiscal Policy Institute. There was a research paper by Guna Bhagya, and she has written about this one. I mean, this is 100% women-oriented schemes. These are 100% women-oriented schemes. And if you look at this number of schemes implemented in different services, for example, Karnataka is also one of the leading. Karnataka 92 total schemes implemented, 100% women-oriented, as I told you. And Orissa, there are 99. Whereas in Himachal Pradesh and Andhra Pradesh, only 35 schemes are 100% women-oriented schemes. Even in women-oriented schemes also, beneficiary-oriented schemes and group schemes are there. So this is 100% women-oriented schemes implemented by different states. And this is the compliance. See, this paper summarized what has happened about the gender budgeting in different states. Based on that, they have made this kind of a diagram. See how gender budgeting compliances, transparency. I mean, based on all the gender budgets. So transparency of budget information, it is in percentages. So percentage, it is more or less all are 100% transparent because numbers are available in the public domain. Whereas focus on structural reforms subsidies, only 96% is achieved. So what I was talking about is post-budget. There is very less attention. See, for example, impact assessment of gender budget scheme, only 4%. Only 4% of the states are doing this. This is the percentage of states adopting the impact assessment of gender budget scheme. So only 4% of the states are impact assessment they are doing. Then need assessment before allocation. This is also very important. I was talking about gender analysis. See, gender analysis comes from need assessment. So before actually giving allocations, there should be need assessment. But need assessment is not done by by many states. As I told you, just like that, 10%, this year we have allocated so much. Okay, next year we'll make it 10%. They will look at the physical targets. See whether they have achieved physical targets or not. So if they are achieved, okay, we'll allocate another 10% more. If they are not achieved, only partially utilized. I mean, basically it is utilization. If it is not utilized, still money is left. Okay, next year we'll reduce it. It is just happening like that. It is not based on the need assessment before the allocation. And gender disaggregated data. Gender disaggregated data is also only 4% of the states have used the gender disaggregated data. And then is gender budgeting implemented successfully at the state level? Only eight states. And also the documentation programs with explanatory notes, 15 states are doing. And auditing, gender budget auditing is done by only 25 states. This is also very important. We also trained auditors in the Fiscal Policy Institute. There was a project and in which I was also part of that. And we trained understanding the gender audit. Only 25. So like that, what is very crucial is, that's why I was telling that ideally that should have been the thing. But what is happening is need assessment. For I can give you one example. There was a Nirbhaya scheme. Okay. And a Nirbhaya scheme, so many crores of money was allotted to take care of the Nirbhaya. I mean, in the sense, I didn't read those modalities, but so much money is allocated under the Nirbhaya scheme. But it is hardly utilized. It is hardly utilized, and nobody bothered to know why it is not utilized. Not only Nirbhaya, any other schemes also. If they are not utilized, there is no attempt to understand why it is not being utilized. Is it because the problems are problems with the scheme itself? Or is it because there is no necessity? Or is it because access is not there? Is it because there is no awareness? Nobody knows why it is not being utilized. So if we understand that, it is possible to re-engineer that scheme or make it useful based on what is called the requirements, needs of the people. So that link is actually missing in our gender budgeting process. So state-specific best practices of gender budget. There are certain state-specific best practices are mentioned in the research paper. So that is the research paper. This is the latest paper, 25 only this has come, I think. So we find some best practices. For example, Orissa need assessment is not adopted, but aligning gender budget schemes with sustainable development goals is initiated. But they also have not initiated the forward and backward thinking. And whereas Maharashtra not established any portal, but established a gender task force to monitor these schemes. So Kerala it is not initiated. So only more not initiated are there. So 57 ministries, they have established the gender budget cells. See here, if you look at this is at the all India level. See, if you look at the allocations for A and B, category A and category B. As I told you, category B A is 100% women schemes and category B is 30% of the money allocated for women. So here, if you look at 23-24 accounts, whereas these are budget estimate, 24-25 is revised also, we can say. See, budget estimates, 37% is women-oriented scheme, 62% category B. Whereas in revised estimates of 24-27, it is 44%. Whereas 25-26, it is reduced to 42.56. But what is the rationale? We don't know why it is reduced. So that is how the transparency is not there. And gender budgeting schemes in Karnataka. In Karnataka, the gender budget schemes, like if you look at the gender budget document produced by Fiscal Policy Institute, you will look at each scheme under each department. Like for example, animal husbandry, women and child welfare, each department wise, you will find these schemes, small schemes. So that is the consolidation of these schemes. So what it says is that category A has increased from 44 to 79, but category B we have 874. There is a slight increase, but compared to 24-25, you will find 25-26 there is less of category A. Category B also there is, category B of course there is an increase. This is just trends. And the all India level, if you look at from 14-15 to 25-26, there is a jump in the allocation of gender budgeting. So outlay increased from 0.96 lakh crores to 4.49 lakh crores, with the percentage share of gender budgeting in union budget to 8.86. It was, in the overall budget, it was 5.46. Now it has increased to 8.86 in the 25-26. And this is the gender budgeting knowledge hub. If anybody is interested, you can also see this portal. There, you will find the gender budgeting of different states, all states, 27 states, it is there. So, hub is created. So, then gender budget in union budget 25-26. This is the expenditure statement of union budget 25-26. So you will find the top 10 ministries departments with more than 30% allocation. So Ministry of Women and Child Welfare, Child Development, Rural Development, Food and Public Distribution, and Department of Drinking Water and Sanitation only 31%. Ministry of Home Affairs. So this is the breakup of top 10 ministries and departments with more than 30%. So they have allocated more than 30% for women schemes. So research on performance of gender budgets. See, I was telling that, I kept on telling that this is theory. So there were research studies which have looked at the what is called how the gender budgets are performing. What is the performance? So it is observed that most studies evaluating the success of gender budgeting initiatives, they focus on the success of their implementation, whether governments are following the steps rather than impact. See, in the earlier paper, he has compiled, the author has compiled what and all practices are followed. See, the researcher also observed that the more time is spent or more emphasis is only on whether the steps are followed or not, rather than understanding the impact in achieving their goal of equality, growth, and inclusive development and human rights. So Joshi evaluated gender budgeting efforts in 6 states: Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Andhra Pradesh, Gujarat, Jharkhand, and Orissa. So the study concluded that implementation has varied. Some states' efforts have focused mainly on pro forma rather than substantive action. So this is the finding of several researchers. So what has been observed is they just only tick mark whether they followed the procedures or not, without bothering about how it is, what impact it has on the people. So Center for Budget Governance and Accountability also evaluated state level gender budgeting efforts. So the Center for Budget and Governance Accountability, they focused on Bihar, Karnataka, Kerala, Madhya Pradesh. So they concluded that Kerala and Madhya Pradesh had the most substantive efforts that had led to meaningful change in fiscal policies. It was found that gender budgeting is positive and significant for primary school enrollment equality. So positive role for gender budgeting. So this success of gender budgeting and gender budgeting affecting the policy and policy changes based on the gender budgeting that happened in a few states, but not in many states. It has not happened in many states. So there was also a panel study. So that also the panel data analysis shows that efforts are significant impact. The other study, because in social research, the findings are influenced by the variables that you have taken for this study. So the effectiveness of gender budgeting was studied in the Asia Pacific region. India was also one of the countries. So in the Asia Pacific region, what they showed was that they said that the gender budgeting impact on gender equality sensitive indicators. So they developed some gender equality sensitive indicators. Based on that, the implications of gender budgeting at sector levels and outcome and fiscals are more ambiguous. They couldn't come out with any specific impact. So female labor among the female labor force, of course, they found it significant. This is for the study of Asia Pacific region, how gender budgets have impacted the studies. So these are the references. See, I was talking about this is the paper, Gender Budget in Indian States, Reviews and Best Practices. And of course, Lekha Chakravarti. Some of these are references which you can check if you want to do. So I want to stop here.